quick. All right, so the idea of federalism really focuses on this idea between, okay, you have the federal government, which we are talking about running through the Constitution, right? Make sure you know the Constitution will be your biggest source here. So I got me there. But we also know that people are still here. They didn't want to have another king. They didn't want to have another like monarch. So they want to make sure some people power is given to the people. So in this case here, what we're looking at is that the idea of federalism is how much power is actually given to the people, meaning us right here. So you go to federal government, you go state, then you go straight to the people. Is everybody clear there?
Yeah.
What's up, y'all?
This was said that for you to give us a tap to our Constitution.
All right. So what you want to do is first look at this idea here is the Constitution. The constitutional structure. Now, let me get somebody to help me because, you know, y'all supposed to already have research done, right? Right? All right. So what parts of the Constitution, feel like where you're going and I'll find it. What parts of the Constitution deal with this idea of federalism? Let me get y'all to tell me. There's three of them. Y'all tell me. Huh? What? I can't hear you. So checks and balances, the separation of three branches. So we got three branches, meaning you got the federal government, which is broken up into judicial. What's the next branch? Legislative. And then, of course, you got the executive, which would be the president, right? That has something to do with it, too. But right early on, as far as the Constitution, you got Article 1, Section 8. So remember when I told you that the Constitution is going to be one of your sources you got to put in, right? Is everybody with me on that? So I'm giving you one. Article 1, Section what? 8. Now, in Section 8, you might have a paragraph. You got to say where that is, too. That way you know exactly where you're going. But based on what y'all see up there, what does Article 1, Section 8 give us? So you just read off the screen. It delegates power to the Congress, meaning, again, now, Congress is made up of who? The House and the Senate. Who has 100% say on that? Who votes for them? The people, right? So unlike the Electoral College who votes for the president, the Congress is voted 100% by us. So, for example, this is 2022. We have a midterm election coming up that I hope y'all are voting in. Is everybody got me on that? And it's 100% popular vote based on who we want to be in Congress, as far as House and the Senate. Is everybody clear there? Okay. Now, you also have the necessary and proper clause, also known as the election clause. Y'all got these great phones. Look it up. Somebody tell me where that is. Where is the necessary and proper clause? Y'all are college students, so look it up. Those who look at me, where is it at? The necessary and proper clause. Am I not giving y'all information to use within your papers?
It enables Congress to pass special laws to require other departments of the government to prosecute or adjudicate particular claims.
So the necessary and proper means that our Congress, this is why you really need to know this, because y'all live in the country, right? They have the power to make other laws as they feel is needed. So I got me on that? Again, necessary and proper. I mean, it's necessary until we got to do it. Does everybody follow me there? All right. The next one is going to be implied powers. That gives Congress the means to exercise its delegated authority. And again, that means this is kind of like, remember this, the Constitution is very, 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 very vague. This is why most Americans never take a second look at it, but everybody want to reference it. It's the idea of you have a level of fallacious baiting because people always say the Constitution, right? But then how many of y'all ever actually read the whole Constitution? Very few. Is that right clear there? But that's where all our laws come from. So the implied powers of the Constitution saying that if it's not necessarily written in black and white, and very little is written in black and white in the Constitution, that it is implied powers, meaning it's implied that we have the right to do this. Does everybody got me on that? Does that make sense so far?
Yeah.
That alone should give y'all some ammunition for now when y'all do your research. But I'm not done. Okay? Questions so far? Nope. All right. So now, let's go to specific parts. This is specific parts of the Constitution. First, the power of the national government is laid out in Article 2. Now, let me break this out. Article 1 is Congress. Everybody got me on that? Article 2 is the executive branch. Article 3 is the judicial branch. Y'all should recall that from last week, right? Okay. So Article 2, powers of the national government. Article 3 is now Judicial Branch. Article 4, that's the Supremacy Clause right there. You got there too. So again, Article 2, the power of the national government. Executive branch, power to enforce the laws. That's the main job of the president. The main role of the president is to enforce the laws that Congress creates. Is that right clear there? The president, even though he and eventually she is always getting all the credit, their job is not very deep. Enforce the law. That's it. They cannot write any laws. So we call it Obamacare, right? In actuality, it's Congress care because they're the ones that wrote it. Obama may help push it and elevate it, but it's Congress who wrote the laws. Is that got me on that? All he did was sign it, but then keep this in mind. Even if they did not get his signature, they could have went back over and overrode it and still passed the law. So ultimately, the powers in our Congress. The judicial branch interprets the law. So we talked about the most recent Supreme Court cases, right? Mainly dealing with the overturn of Miranda rights and also Roe v. Wade, right? As far as abortion. They interpreted, and I said, I get why they did it, and I'm surprised they knew early because there's nowhere in the Constitution that is saying that, yes, you have the right to an abortion, but it's an implied right. Because when we talk about the whole idea about national rights, by John Locke, right? The idea of national rights, that's where that kind of comes from, but it's not explicitly said in the Constitution. And it can be reversed real quick, too. It's very, very, depends on who's in the court. Now, the National Supremacy Clause means the national and state government shall have the power. This clause declares that laws in the United States take precedent over what laws? State. There can never be a law that supersedes that of the who. Who can never have a law that supersedes them? The state can't write a law to supersede Congress. I mean the national government. Is everybody clear there? Why do we care about the idea that the states can't write a law to oversee the federal government? Why do we care about that? Y'all, I swear to God, like I'm thinking about like 4 news articles I've seen in the last 24 hours dealing with this. Why is it such a big deal? You don't want the states to write a law or have the power to overthrow or override a congressional or constitutional law. Why is that such a big deal? This is not rhetorical. Y'all live here, right? Because, you don't want the states to have more power than the federal government. So, here's it out. Look at the civil rights movement. Is it right clear there? Brown v. Board of Education ended segregation as far as how we saw it with Jim Crow. Is it right clear there? You had numerous states that were trying to say, no, you can't do that. We're going to keep our segregation the way it is. The federal government's like, no, you're not. I'm about to send the military and ensure that you desegregate your schools. Is that right? Got me on that? Is that right? Follow me so far? Even though the state of Georgia during COVID pretty much lifted most of their mask mandates very quickly, right? Even though Hartsfield International Airport is in Georgia, they still have to put those masks on that airport, though. That's federal ground. Do I follow me on that? That's important when it comes to the idea of federalism because, for now, so example, this is one thing, one of these came up. So right now, the Biden administration has put in the policy to where they're about to forgive a whole bunch of student loans, right? I know of at least one state, Mississippi, that's saying, well, you know what, we're about to make a law to where we're going to still tax that. That's going to be a problem with federalism because now you're going against a federal mandate. So I got me on that? That's going to end up going to the courts eventually, if it actually gets put on the blade. Now, can the state have the right to do that? Yes. But then to come back to the judicial branch and say, okay, hey, wait, is this legal or not? And based on the National Supremacy Clause, it ain't going to be hard to overturn it. Everybody follow me on that? Which is also the reason why, let's say, legalize marijuana. That's a big problem because you have a lot of states that got to legalize, right? The federal government don't. The federal government and states typically want to be together to not have a lot of issues. That's going to be legalized sooner than later for a simple fact. It has to because you have an imbalance. You got all these states that has it legalized, but the federal government hasn't. So I got me on that? That's a problem with federalism again. I hope y'all appreciate this. I just gave some people a lot of stuff to write in their research. Questions so far? Y'all good? Is this kind of helpful though? Yeah. Okay. I'm listening. So let me give you more background on student loans, particularly because I'm probably got the most student loans debt and probably anybody in school. and I pray to God I am because I don't want no one to be in my situation. I went to school a lot. Okay? I went to private schools a lot. Private schools cost more money. So I owe a lot of money. Like, a lot. Like, I got enough to buy a house in California a lot. Probably a little bit more than that a lot. Okay? So, I say that to say this is that the federal student loans is a big problem, similar to 2008 with the financial bubble. Do I got me on that? You have all these people in debt. That means they don't have money to put back into the economy, which is going to make the economy eventually crash again. Keep this in mind. The economy is not doing good right now. Does everybody follow me on that? Now, the idea of forgiving $10,000, for some, that's a really big deal. A person like me, thanks, but it's a drop in the bucket. So I don't know if it's going to be more than once. I don't know how it looks, but the fact that the federal government is saying that should give you a red flag that is a big problem there. They're not going to just forgive debt for no reason. Just like y'all got, when we got stimulus checks, that wasn't done on accident. It was a reason for it. You got me on that? The federal government is never going to react to something unless it has to. So that tells you federal student loans is a big deal because guess what? Schools cost a lot of money. Yeah, but then that takes the economy.
But it's so expensive.
I mean, you have some programs where it don't cost as much, but so like the GI Bill that helps people out, but you got some in the military for some amount of time. But yeah, the cost of college is so much that it weighs people down because again, you go to school, you make money, but then if you pay back student loans, you're not really making that much money. If I got me on that, on top of you buying a house, let's say you got kids, it's killing the economy because you're not able to put as much in. Do I follow me on that? So over the last 2 or 3 years, you have people not paying student loans. Now that money they use student loans, they spend it somewhere, right? They definitely not saving it because we're not very good at saving. Hopefully some people are, but I'm just saying, right? So even if you put them in the stock market, that still helps the economy. Do I got me on that? So that is a basic forgive somebody, but it's gonna stimulate the economy in other ways, though. In theory, this is all theoretical. Okay, I'm not saying it's sure in theory, but that's a big deal. So I got me on that. Make sense so far?
Yeah.
All right, let's go on. So we still talk about this idea of federalism. Federalism deals with the idea of states and federal government. Is that clear there? This is such a hard topic because we don't really pay attention to it, but it affects us every single day. Like, what is the role of the states in the federal government? What can the states do compared to what they can't do in our federal government? Is that clear there? And keep this in mind. We live in the Atlanta, Georgia area, right? You do understand that this is a federal district. When you go downtown, you are walking on federal ground sometimes. You don't even know it. So yes, in Atlanta, having marijuana is not necessarily prosecutable, meaning you may not go to jail. But if you are not aware where you're sitting or standing and you're on a federal ground, guess what can happen? You can. Because it's not legal federally. But do y'all see the problem though? State and federal. That's already an issue there too. So the Article 5 is the full faith and credit and the privileges of the Immune Clause. So they saying states exercise the reserved or residual rights of the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment very explicitly says, and in fact, let me get my Constitution and I'll read it to you. Let me reiterate this to y'all. Y'all have the internet, right? You should print off a copy of the Constitution. Just saying, it'll help you out. Now, is mine kind of edited and annotated? This is like from 2006, but this is my Bible. This is how I do everything. So now go to the 10th Amendment. Now, let's go to that deeper, saying that some people don't know Roman numerals. And notice what I did. For every Roman numeral, I still put the what there? The numbers. That's what I know. Here's what the 10th Amendment says. And I quote, the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states, respectively, or the people. Does that make sense? Yeah, I was just had that bookmark, especially while you're in this class. So what that is saying is that if it's not in the Constitution and the states do not explicitly say it, guess who has the right to do it? Us. Is that clear there? And let me be clear, there's not a lot. There's not stated somewhere in somebody's Constitution either be the state or the federal government, but it's saying that we have those rights. Everybody got me on that? Yes, it goes back to the idea of implied. But also it goes back to the idea that, okay, think about this really logically as far as anything goes in our society. Who's closer to us, the federal government or the state? The state. So that means if it's a state power, that's closer because they understand us better. Do I got me on that? So you might have a Department of Education in the federal level, but you also got school districts as a filter. The federal government say what you got to do, then the state says you got to do, then your school district says what you got to do, then it comes down to the school, and then you see the filter. But that's all the whole idea about federalism. So you still have this whole pathway, which sometimes can make it even more confusing and clouded too. Y'all with me? Go ahead.
There's a mix-up right there at federal and state, and then it gets brought down to the school. So like
it happens daily, hourly, consistently, and that's sometimes where you can say our system does not work very well. It could be just one misconnection. One misconnection I have during the COVID is the idea of standardized testing. Is everybody got me on that? The federal government at first saying, no, still get your federalized tests. We need them no matter what. And you had like the state of Georgia like, wait, no, this ain't gonna work. We need to not be able to get these tests. So then they had to appeal that to the federal government, who had to give them approval. And then the state said, after they got approval, okay, now it's districts, you ain't get the test. Problem was, we found out that about like a week before the test came in. Well, before we had to administer the test. Go ahead. Whoever.
How come in New York you can like opt out and you don't have to take it?
That's not always just a New York thing. That's where you got to actually read your laws and guidelines. Many states have similar things. Me as being a government official, some things I cannot answer. All I can tell you is that you got to go read your legislation. You got to read your rights. Read your student handbook. You know that thing that nobody ever looks at? It's so much in there that gives you your rights. You got to look at it. What were you about to ask?
You said standardized tests?
Yeah, I'll use standardized tests as an example. REOC. It's not actually, again, you got to read the handbook because the schools have to do what the districts say. The districts got to do what the states say. So right now, the state of Georgia says, for example, and every state is different, that you have to have a high school EOC in U.S. history. You got one, I believe, in one of the math, I forgot which one, in biology. It used to be a lot more, though. So I got me on that? But they had to ask the federal government, was this okay before they cut down how many tests you get? Do I follow? Does that make sense to everybody? Now, you as a student, particularly you and your parents, have even more rights that you typically don't even know. And honestly, this is why I go back to say why the government set like this. The government set like this because the average American, I will always argue, is very ignorant to how this works. They have no idea. So because you have no idea, you can always get played like a horse. Because you have no idea. Now, can you go Google this? Yes. The information is there. But just like with y'all research, it's not that it's hard to do it. You are not used to deciphering all this language. And you are in a privileged situation where y'all getting some more background, or if you listeners, you getting some more background. The average person don't know what they're talking about when it comes to this, but yet you go vote. Y'all see the problem with that now? Yeah. If you voting not knowing, it just makes it just keeps making things worse and worse. So for example, oh my God, I forgot this quote talking about Malcolm X, but I'm paraphrasing something Malcolm X said. From the Battle of the Bullet, it comes from that, and I'm paraphrasing. The idea that you blindly vote on party lines solely because your mom and daddy did it, but you may be actually voting against your best interest. Does I follow what that means? Yeah. You're voting solely, okay, I'm going to use me as an example. My mom and dad, they're 80-some years old plus, they are staunch Democrats to the day they die. I get it. They grew up in a different time period. My first election, guess who I voted? Democrat. Because guess who house all I had? My mom and dad, right? Now, as I started getting older, I started saying, wait a second. There are cases where independents might be better for me, Republicans might be better for me, also Democrat. I am not, and then So, man, let me tell you about, dang. All right, I don't care. I'm being honest, be blunt. That's what I got to do, right? In California, you can vote across all party lines. Do I got me on that? Again, that's where I'm from. Do I got me on that? So follow me. So when I get my ballot, I can vote on both sides of the aisle. Is I clear here? In Georgia, you cannot do that. You vote Democrat, you're going to get the Democratic side of it. You vote Republican, you vote Republican side of it. This is the horrible part. Let's say you're nonpartisan, which really I am, right? I did this once. I would not get candidates from nobody on my ballot, only state issues. So they're forcing you to go one side, which is really, I would argue is really bad, because for me, it might be a candidate here I really like, it would be good for me. I might have a candidate here. I should be able to look at both sides of the aisles and vote. I can see where some people make arguments where that's a bad thing, but if you have an intelligent, in the sense of politics, population, you would trust them more to do that. Obviously, Georgia's not trusting their population to be able to decipher what's best. And you probably never noticed that unless you go to another state. I noticed it because guess what? I lived in California for 24 years of my life. And I'm still technically a registered voter there because I have property there. That's another story in itself. So you have to be able to be educationally aware and understand how the powers come back, because ultimately the state decides how the elections go. You know, the federal government says you got to have an election. States decide on how it's going to go. That makes sense? Is this helping? Yeah. And I had this in my back pocket. And again, this is going to be a course so you always can go back and look at it to help you out. But I couldn't have said this to y'all earlier in the week. It would make no sense at all. Now you have to at least look at it. Hopefully some light bulbs going off. All right. So the state has the authority, the power to tax and spend. So you know how you got state taxes and federal taxes, right? The state decides on how they want to do their taxes, but the federal government, you got those too. So no matter what, you pay both sides of it. Is everybody got me on that? So California tax rate is far higher than what's here in Georgia. Even though I always owe Georgia, but I never owe taxes in California, but I don't know. They also regulate land use through eminent domain, and also local commerce as far as how much. So you don't notice this. You have the federal tax, state tax, you got your local taxes too. It's how you go to a store, you're paying local taxes. We fought a whole revolution about paying taxes, and guess what we do every day in our life? We pay nothing but taxes on everything. Again, I always find it crazy that we fought a whole war about taxing, and all we do is tax and pay it. But when you have a population that's not aware, no one complains, okay, it's going about our day. Now, the taxes do pay for streets, schools, my salary, so thank you for everybody that owns a home in the district. I pretty appreciate it. Also, I'm paying myself because I own a home in the district. But at the same token, you have to look at how these taxes are being used, and you always, as a voting population, you can also dictate that too. So people got a problem like, you don't like this part of school, but how many of y'all got your parents go to the school board meetings? I'm asking rhetorically. How many actually you talk to the principal about anything? Asking that rhetorically too. So we have a habit which makes federalism even more difficult of complaining about everything. We never want to fix nothing. It does nothing to complain to the people that probably feel the same way as you. Take your butt down to the school board, see what happens then. They might not hear you, but guess what? A whole bunch of other people is hearing you too, right? Somebody outside of your little circle. Has everybody got me on sense on that? So you go on Facebook, first off, we know that you only see people on Facebook that you follow, right? So you complaining to the people that follows you, what is that really doing? You need to get a broader reach to get to people that maybe not in your circle. You can make obviously you say them with Snapchat, but I get where you're going with that. All right, so I know this is kind of hard to see, but zoom in a little bit. All right, so you have here your national powers, coin money, your airports, things like that, right? Is everybody with me so far on that? All right. Then you have your state powers. Local governments, you know, like you have your own local government that we have with our local government could be, we have our own house. Y'all do know this, right? And y'all gonna be doing some more research when we get to local governments. You have our own house. We have our own representatives. Our governor is our executive. Everybody got me on that? So it mirrors that of the federal government. We regulate our commerce. We conduct our elections, adopt measures for public safety and morale. Now, what we have together is that we both pay taxes, right? We both borrow money. Talk about the federal and the state. We both charter banks and corporations. Everybody clear there? These are things that we also do together. Everybody got me? But they're very much dependent on each other, though. Does that make sense to everybody? So the idea that we all have one currency is the idea of federalism, because we don't have to worry about exchanging our currency based on what state we go to. That makes sense to everyone? Good? All right. I'm almost done. So now the national supremacy and the Supreme Court. Understand that the Supreme Court comes back and makes the final decision. So the most easy one to get into for 2022 is the overturn of Roe v. Wade. Easy one to go to because it just happened for us a couple months ago. So federally, Roe v. Wade, having an abortion is now illegal. Is everybody clear there? And it's illegal because now what the federal government said, we're putting it back on the states. So now the states decide if you can or you cannot have abortion. Do I follow? So you have states like California saying, yes, you can still have abortion, no matter. Okay? But then you have a state like Alabama, it's like, nope, you pregnant, you having that baby, I don't care what the situation is. It's up to the state. Now, for better or for worse, we can say, oh, well, someone can just go to another state to get abortion. Is that really true, though?
So, the 14th Amendment, right?
14th Amendment due process.
And it says that all rights, that women have all rights to abortion.
It does not say women have all rights to abortion. Nowhere in our Constitution is even abortion mentioned, which is why it was surprising to me, as long as I could say for a law student, to say this was never overturned. It's been waiting to be overturned because it's not explicitly stated. It's the Constitution is only as good as the interpretation. Does everybody got me on that? Because it has to be the amendment. Can we ever agree on anything? So how the heck are we going to get an amendment put in the Constitution? They just tried to write an amendment to the Constitution not too many weeks ago, and it didn't get very far. Why? We don't agree on it. If you want abortion to be protected by the Constitution, it has to be explicitly said. And there's a reason why. This country's been around since 1785. There ain't that many amendments. Just saying. And it's a reason why. Can't agree on nothing. But your point is what you're saying is that the average American don't know that. So they'll say something like, oh, the 14th Amendment protects women's rights. That's your interpretation. I'm not saying interpretation is wrong, but it does not explicitly say that. It doesn't, and that's why they can overturn it. Because Roe v. Wade said that the Constitution protects women's right to abortions, when technically it doesn't. You could, technically, if you have the means. First off, abortion costs money. Secondly, you got to get there. That costs money. Secondly, you got to recover. That costs money. There's elements to this right here. So, Georgia Georgia will ban it, but it's a hold on it from the federal government because of the way the law was written. But Georgia's about to have a 6-week bill, basically saying once you get pregnant, most women don't know they're pregnant until about 6 to 8 weeks anyway. If you didn't know that, now you do. And I could be off, but I'm saying it don't take very long. Whatever the weeks is, they basically saying once you know, you still got to have that kid. Now, that's going to be another issue because guess what? It's going to go back to the Supreme Court again. You know why? Because you're going to have states doing something the federal government didn't do. You'll have states doing something different. It's going to become a state problem. You got me on that? For example, and do not quote me on this because I'm coming off the top of my head and I'm tired. All right. But you may have people going from California to Arizona, for example, or let's say Florida. No, definitely not Florida. Let's just say 2 states. One state that is totally fine with abortion, one state that is not fine with abortion, right? The fact that you don't have people going to other states is going to cause a problem for the simple fact it's safety issues. You got me on that? Because after you have an abortion, most women may need to recover. What have they got? And then you also got the idea of having illegal abortions, meaning you don't have no doctor present at all. That's a whole nother problem. That's one reason why Roe v. Wade was taken because, well, again, you think about morally, I'm thinking about legally. Legally, that's not my problem as a legal scholar. That's not my problem as a constitution. That's a moral issue. And abortion really comes out to the idea of morality. But are they? The court can say, am I causing more issues? I don't know. That's where you got to come up with your argument. But as far as the Constitution, it does not say a word about abortions. But where is medical deaths being covered in the Constitution? Nowhere. So y'all see where I'm going at? You all are making good arguments. You make arguments I understand, but there are moral arguments. The Constitution does not deal with morality. First off, there's always been abortions. There's always been women that will get pregnant, have a kid, and they will not want their kids. Do I got me on that? Do we all understand? We all can say that, right? We can go back as late as the 1780s and know there was abortions. They was not very safe. Is that clear there? They definitely have all the compensation. There's even some people. I'm not going there. There was no what's the word? Not constitution. Contraceptives, right? Where is healthcare in the Constitution? There isn't. The Constitution is extremely vague.
But wouldn't that fall under women's rights?
Where's women's rights in the Constitution for that matter? No, it isn't. So again, I'm sorry to finally have you awake of all this, but guess what? The Constitution is extremely vague. That's what makes it so powerful. Because it's so vague, it can be interpreted by different people. Is that got me on that? There's no reference. No. Again, this is let me tell y'all this. It took me years to understand this, but let me tell you this. The Constitution, you got to write this down, understand this. The Constitution is only as good as the interpreter. Is that got me on that? My background is not history, is it? No, my background is law and black studies. Is that got me on that? The way I interpret the Constitution is vaguely different than everybody else. So when I wrote my dissertation talking about stigmas associated with a black male incarceration, I'm dealing with constitutional issues from my perspective. So my interpretation of it be a certain kind of way. Do I got me on that? That's why in the perfect world, you want a Supreme Court made up of a whole bunch of different backgrounds. Do I got me on that? For the simple fact that you have different feeders giving you ideas. And as you say, some people say it's not, but the idea is that that's what you want. You want a broad scope of the whole society.
So, like, we fought a war against, like, being held captive and feeling oppressed, and we fought, and we wanted a government that showed compassion and morality. That's not in the Constitution.
And this is why last year when y'all taking U.S. history, you should have took it more seriously.
No, we didn't.
And the reason why I say it because the history part of it really makes this make sense. Because Alexander Hamilton, all those guys when they was writing the Federalist Papers, watch the movie Hamilton. Like, it's more than just a cool show. Like, he's breaking down everything that happened as far as our development.
Okay, but
and it led to what we got now.
The Constitution is so vague, then why do we still follow it now and not try to make it more
Again, this is why, first off, we can't agree on nothing. Y'all don't vote. Nor do you care to find out more information, nor do you care to find out the vote. Last year was the first time in U.S. history where over 50 to 60% of the population finally voted. Malcolm X said it back in the 60s. The government is not looking for y'all to vote. That way they can constantly keep running over you. You finally did it, and guess what they did? They started changing voting laws. The Charles Beard had a very serious theory, and y'all not getting this, but I'm giving y'all so much stuff. And do y'all see why I don't like lecturing about this? Am I even looking at this thing? I'm just going to talk about it. That's why I hate doing this stuff, because I know I can go all day with it, so I apologize, but hopefully it's helping you. Charles Beard said that the government will always deal with problems in one of a few ways. Either it's going to incorporate the problem, Charles Beard. Either they're going to incorporate the problem, they're going to destroy the problem, or they're going to ignore it. Do I got me on that? Because the government must maintain sustainability. Does everybody got me on that? Our government has been very stable, true or false, since 1785 for all practical purposes. Minus the Civil War, we've been pretty cool as far as a government. You might have squabbles. Give me one second. You might have squabbles, but other than the Civil War, we've been pretty good for the most part. As bad as people say things are right now, we're not the Civil War, are we? The country's not fractured. I mean, you could say, oh, the country's fractured. Not like the Civil War. Because we found ways to either incorporate, ignore, or destroy problems.
But it's still fractured like that because it's just because we're not fighting.
Okay.
But is it? Because, again, Civil War, you had North, you had South, two separate countries. That's fractured. You had two different incomes. Everything was done. Two different presidents. Everything was different. We don't have that now. Is it?
They can't agree on anything.
They may not agree with nothing, but they might not agree with something. But guess what? We still could get in our cars, drive that home, right?
They're together, but they're not agreeing.
I get what you're saying, but and I'm coming to your question now. As far as structure, the country's still stable. It may not be super stable, but it's still functioning. And y'all still believe in it. And we still believe in it as a people because we have not done anything to overturn it. I'm not saying we should, but I'm saying we trust the system enough to where we're okay with it. We trust the system enough, we're going to get our paychecks. We better go to the bank, get our money out. We can take our kids to this, and this. Y'all can come to school or not come to school. Get on the computer. We trust the system enough to where is that we're okay with the status quo. If we're okay with the status quo, Charles Beard says we're fine. The system is functioning. You may not be happy, but then are you voting to change it? Are you actually looking at, are you registered to vote to change it? Are you looking at the candidates? When the candidates come to place, do you actually go there and speak, ask them questions? Those are all different elements where you say, okay, we want to change. We don't do those things. I can think about 5 more things to get into that. What's your question?
Okay, so you're saying the whole abortion thing is moral, but wasn't the civil rights thing moral? There wasn't ever, I mean, yes, there was a law saying like segregation, but like still was kind of a moral thing, like, hey, you should not treat somebody bad, or they shouldn't be segregated because they're different. It's not the same thing, but kind of like.
This is what's different. Slavery is inexplicitly stated in the Constitution, though.
Slavery, I was saying civil rights.
But this, but it's gonna go so.
They don't use the word.
But let me follow what I'm saying with that. Civil rights came from the idea of slavery as far as people not having rights, hence civil rights. Slavery was explicitly put in very early in the Article 1 of the Constitution. Therefore, you can now make a constitutional amendment to fix previous issues, i.e. 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments. Whereas abortion is, first, the Constitution is written by all men. They're not going to put abortion in there anyway. Women had no rights when the Constitution was written. It's not going to be put in there anyway. And in fact, women were expected to have babies, and plenty of them when the Constitution was written. It's not going to be in there anyway. I mean, you can make arguments, you can, but again, how do you get it rewritten? Do you vote? Are you ready to vote? Do you hold those people in power accountable? And most of us don't. This is what I'm going to say. In a few weeks, I'm going to give y'all some ammunition to do what y'all are saying. And you're going to have to go find out who your elected officials are. I guarantee y'all going to have a hard time. You know why? Because you don't know who the heck they are, where they stay, or even how to call them, or even how to email them. That's why we have these problems, because no one, you're not happy with it. Okay, cool, I get that. But you have a democracy that gives you a lot of power to vote. Other than the presidency, based on our first 2 articles, all the power is rested in the people in the Congress. That voting is 100%. Senators got 6 years, and then House members got 2 years. We keep allowing them to get reelected because either we like them or we don't ever vote. So I'm one of the people that would argue that you do make changes with vote, but educated vote. It's something called vote quadrant. Look that up. Is that you have to understand how each quadrant of the equation impacts the next one. You live here in Kyle County, right? So you got to not only understand how Kyle County politics works, you got to understand how Georgia politics work. How does Georgia politics work as part of the larger United States politics? You got to look at each quadrant to make sure you vote there. So you don't be mad at the laws as far as police. We don't know who your sheriff is. You can't be mad that you're getting put in jail when you never vote for your DA, or even though you had a DA. Is everybody got me on that? You have to know every system of the government to actually make it change. Federalism is made for you actually supposed to know every part of it. But we have this problem, we have this system because just like in 1785, most of our population is totally ignorant of how the government works. And I will make one more argument. Most foreign individuals that come in here, because they had to study to become American citizen, know more about this country than the people that live here because they got to study to make sure they pass that test, which means they know more than you. You take it for granted because you don't have to take no citizenship test, do you? They got to take it, which means they got to learn everything you're supposed to be learning. And in fact, y'all get married, you got to take this class and other classes because you don't want to learn. You find it be boring, whereas they're doing it for their whole livelihood. But we get mad at the immigrants, particularly the ones that didn't get here legally, then particularly the ones that get the cars when they actually did more work than you did and you was born here. This is all rhetorical, I'm just saying.
So, like, you know, like the commercial where they're like saying you shouldn't vote for this person because of what they do, and then the other person saying you shouldn't vote for this person because they're a liar. And then how would you know who's gonna do like what? You know what I mean?
Go to the speaking where you actually go.
But everybody.
What's your question?
Do you think that we should have made the Constitution more specific?
No, because if the Constitution is more specific, it's
time period.
yeah, before that only time period, and we wouldn't have a consistent rewriting every 10 seconds. The fact that the Constitution is very vague, it's lasted since 1785.
I mean, they wrote it with that in mind for it.
Yeah, and it's a very good document. But it's up to interpretation, which is not a bad thing. It's just a question of who's interpreting. And every 10 to 15 years, that interpretation may change. But us as a population, as a democratic society, we have the votes to go and do it. It's just a question, do we do that? Right? And then more importantly, I'm not going to say just to vote. Do you vote? Okay, we care so much about the federal, we forget our local. So in 2 years, there's going to be a presidential election. So I got me on that? That's cool. But like I said, based on Article 2 of the Constitution, it's electoral college. Everybody's going to do everything they can to figure out who they want for president. There's going to be a whole bunch of other stuff on local. You're not going to know what you're doing, and people just blindly vote, if they vote at all. And guess what? Same kind of problem keeps happening. We got midterm elections coming up in November. How many people are even going to vote for that? You know why? Because there's no fancy names on there for presidency. So that is an issue right there, too. If you hold, typically, think about any job. If you hold someone accountable, guess what? They're going to do good at their job. Typically. Is that got me on that? But if I can bake on your ignorance and know I'm going to have a job for the rest of my life, why should I care? I'm going to vote based on my best interest, or the people that do actually care and listen to me or put me in that position. All right, so let me get to these couple court cases. If you haven't saw these already, you got a couple court cases. This is kind of dated. But the first one, again, we already said this, McCullough v. Maryland. That gives a broad scope of the doctrine of implied powers. That's where we started at. Did I got me on that? And there's more cases more similar. Again, I just told you a couple of cases. One overturned the Miranda rights, saying that when you stop by the police officer, they got to tell you have the right to remain silent, blah, blah, blah. That has now been taken away. So a police officer don't have to tell you that. And you also got the Roe v. Wade. So there's some more you can add into that. But that's a pretty good handful of cases you can use right there. Nope. Nope. You hope. And again, I can understand this ruling too, because if you're a police officer and you're in a high stress situation, right? Out of everything going on, you might not remember that. And what the court says, basically saying you can't use that against the officer under high stress situation. And again, I get that, but but you still, that Miranda right was there for a reason, because we say you should, but y'all don't know your rights here at the school. Let's forget going out into the public now. We don't know our rights here at the school. So we should know over here, you're here most of your life, right? But you don't know. Yeah.
Can't they just make people vote? Like, why can't
no.
They make us get vaccines. Why can't they just make us?
They don't make you do vaccines either. It's still a choice. It's ultimately a choice. No one can. Since slavery was been abolished and abolished since the end of the Civil War in the 13th Amendment, no one's actually forcing you to do anything. You might think you're being forced, but you're really not. There might be a consequence, but you don't have to do anything. Look at Kyrie. He didn't want to get a vaccine, right? That's cool. And who knows? He may have got it, he may not. We don't know. But guess what? He didn't. He didn't play. He was cool with that. He didn't have to do it. There was just a consequence. We can't make you go vote, because if you're made to go vote, your vote may not be as authentic, for lack of a better phrase. Well, first off, you have a person that has a law background in Black studies. I'm not teaching like everybody else alone. That's kind of where it stops. This is a required class to graduate, though. So they are enforcing it. Now, here's the other thing, too. Y'all all was, for the most part, pre-selected to take this class by me. So y'all already got a buy-in to me. That's a bias in itself, right? You still got to take this class. Everybody may be going into the same depth as me. I don't know. It's still a standard for you to know, though. Is everybody got me on that? As far as this being a college class, it's the same college standards across different students in the States. But I am only me. It's only one Dr. T. To answer your question. This is high school, too. You have to take American government to graduate in Georgia. That's a class requirement. You got to take U.S. history. You got to take world history. You got to take American government before you graduate any school in Georgia. So, in other words, you take this class. Did you pay attention to it, though? I'm not asking you. But did you pay attention to it? You got to take personal finance now. You got to take economics. So you actually are supposed to learn how to deal with your money. Did you pay attention to it, though? Or were you on TikTok? These are rhetorical questions. But y'all know I'm going with this. Right? All right, so that's the supremacy in the Supreme Court. So we should have some background on McCullough v. Maryland, but let's look at Dred Scott v. Sanford, all right? Now, you should know Dred Scott from U.S. history. What was the Dred Scott decision? What did that have to deal with? Who's he?
He was born a citizen in one state, and then he went to another, right? And then he argued that he should...
No, opposite. Dred Scott was a slave, and his master moved to a northern area that was free. And Dred Scott argued, hey, I'm in a new state that's free, therefore I should be what? Free. Well, I don't want to say the name of the justice wrong because, brother say I'm tired already. But the justice said, you know what? Wait a second. We're not going to talk about freedom. You're not even a person to come in front of the court. You're property. So, goodbye. But at the same time, how does that do with federalism? Person moved property for this, in this case here, moved from one area to another. How's that state's going to look at it, and how's the federal government going to look at it? Does that make sense, everybody? All right, that's a lot. All right, so now national supremacy. So in the early 1930s, the court limited the power of the national government by striking down key elements of the New Deal. Y'all remember the New Deal was things that was put in to try to help the country get out of the Great Depression. Do y'all see why y'all take government after you take U.S. history and theory? You got to have that U.S. history background to make it take government. Okay? Now, in 1937, the court began finding New Deal legislation constitutional, but in subsequent years, it rarely found constitutional limitations on the exercise of the federal government until the middle 1990s. That's when the court changed its attitude when it overturned the Gun-Free School Zone Act of 1990 and one provision of the Brady Act, a federal gun law, control law. And in 2000, the court invalidated the provisions of the Violence Against Women's Act. There are other issues that came out most recently you can use, but these are the ones based on when I made this presentation, which is dated, as you can probably tell, that we got. Okay? So this is national supremacy, the Supreme Court. So when you look at this idea of federalism, y'all follow me? So you follow me? Clap once. Oh, that sucks. Okay, you with me? Clap once. All right, let's do it together. On three. 1, 2, 3. All right. The Supreme Court is really, really deep. So when you're writing your research on this, you have to refer to not only the Constitution, but also the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court is interpreting the Constitution. And let me say this, you're not living in the Supreme Court. You got a whole federal court system you can look at. So I got me on that? They are all still interpreting the Constitution, looking at states and what they're doing and what they cannot do. Everybody clear on that? All right, questions so far? We're almost done. We really are. It's just, no, but we're not going through the whole thing. Is this helpful at least?
Yeah, it's actually a lot more serious.
All right. Now, I don't want to go into federal grant programs only because I'm mentally not there. So I'm going to stop here, okay? All right, questions before I go ahead and just shut this thing down.